Inclusion is not built by systems. It's built by people, by families, and everyday acts of courage, compassion, and love. And today's conversation is the one that comes straight from the heart. Welcome to Included, powered by Million Opinions, a place where real voices amplify the conversations. Conversations that educate us, that challenge us, and truly make us believe why we do what we do. Voices that stand strong in the inclusion and neurodiversity community across the UAE and the globe. Today's episode is about seeing through a different lens, a parent's lens, the fears, the growth, the resilience, and the deep love and curiosity that fuels the journey. Today, we welcome our guest, Mrs. Laura, a parent advocate and mother to a remarkable little boy. Laura has stood as the central pillar of strength for Ali, connecting the care providers and all of them in providing the circle of care, and here to share her journey and experiences with us. Hi Laura, welcome to Included. I've been a part of Ali's and your family's journey for the past 4 years, but today I'd like to step back as his clinician and speak to you as a parent, an advocate for inclusion and neurodiversity, as an entrepreneur, and most importantly, a woman who's truly inspiring for many of them, including myself. I'm a great fan of yours, who truly leads this journey for him with so much courage, compassion, and love. So are you ready to share your story and have some fun with us on this episode?
Indeed I am. It is an honor and a privilege.
Thank you. So tell us a little more about yourself.
My name is Laura. I am from the Caribbean, islands of Trinidad and Tobago. I am 47 years old. I've traveled around the world. I live in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai. This is my 9th country. So I've had a very vast career in luxury hospitality. And then 7 years ago, I had a change in career. I became a mother to a very, very special boy. And that has changed my life completely.
True. Ali is remarkable, unique, and so filled with love and compassion, just like you. So can you tell us a little more about your journey as a neurodivergent family?
So Ali Sander, when he was first born, we didn't have many complications to alert us to something going on. And it was only when he was 1 year old that we discovered that he was born with 5p-Minus syndrome, or cri du chat, as it's also known as. And the first years were hard because I was one of those mums with the Wonder app, charting every single week, this should happen, that should happen. And I thought, it's not happening. What's going on here? And I am being so far away from home, I didn't have a lot of family here, family support. Having the conversations with my husband, who happens to be from the region as well, it was something completely out of, he can't do this and this at the same time. And so it was hard at first. But once I started running, I felt like I have never stopped. Yeah.
And you've come a really long way in this journey. And we've seen how Ali's come a really, really long way in this journey. But if there's one thing that you could go back to Laura at the time of diagnosis and tell yourself, what would that be?
Don't doubt your gut feeling ever. Never, never, never. And even if you take a misstep and you find out the hard way, that's okay. Because having a child who is 1 in 50,000, he has a rare condition. And at the time, and till today, I have never met in person another family here in Dubai I've spoken to not even spoken to, I've WhatsApped, I've been part of Facebook groups, but here in this country, I have never really connected with another family of a child with 5p-. So it's a very lonely journey to a certain extent, but what really helped me at the time was to find my tribes or find people who are in similar situations. And for sure, that's not family members. So that's something I would say to not just myself, but all parents. And no matter if you're at the beginning, middle, you're blessed to be later on in the journey, never doubt your gut, because that sense is what gets you through.
And I would definitely see a lot of parents in a very similar situation, especially when they come in understanding something is not right, or maybe something is very different. We don't know what, but we truly have that gut feeling as a mom, as a dad, as a caregiver, that something is very, very different going on here. And I think that's one of the most important information as a clinician on the other side, for us to understand that, okay, we need to look into something much more deeper to really help out understand what's going on. Yeah. One another thing which I always admire about you is how you have created the circle of care for Ali, right? And we've spoken about this in a lot of conferences, meetings, and panel discussions. But can you tell us what keeps you motivated, or rather what gives you that strength and courage to sometimes even question professionals or clinical information sometimes, or decisions, or schools, and a lot of other things that are there. So what is that you want a parent to truly believe in and put themselves out there?
Let's go back to this circle of care. So here in the UAE, it's not like many other countries where services are provided by the government or by an insurance provider. We have to make a lot of decisions on our own. And so we work with, at the very base, a doctor, in our case, because it's a pathological medical situation. Then we work with schools. Then we hire somebody to shadow. We also, even if we're lucky enough to have help at home, the way we look at that person and their potential. So my motivation has been, I never made a decision by myself. I always gathered data from others, and I really value what they said, and I listened to what they said. And to a certain point these days, I'm very blessed because Ali at one point was pre-verbal, and now he's verbal. We're still working on a lot of speech and cognitive, but I assume competence and I ask him a question. So I think I feel so good about decisions, and they land right because they are centered around Ali, but also I take into consideration the collaborative approach. So I don't just listen to the doctor, I listen to the learning support, I listen to the therapists. And very, very important, I share what I learn with everybody. So we're all on the same page. And we all have one goal in mind, to help Ali develop to his fullest potential. So I think that's what's motivating, because when I do that and I see the results that are happening, I'm fascinated. There isn't a time that goes by that I'm not fascinated by my son and what we're finding out, but we're looking for it. So this is, I think, going on that gut, asking questions, making decisions based on that questions, and seeing the results unfold.
Amazing. And in this journey of, let's say, adding on people who form that circle of care for him, as a parent, there are going to be days which are easy, days which are going to be hard, and days that you might want to give up because it's really hard, right? What is something you would like to tell a lot of parents who are starting this journey new, in terms of what should keep them going even on the hardest days, and a lot of times the guilt that goes in, or the anticipation of what if my decision is wrong because I'm taking this step for my child.
One of the things I do a lot is I lean into my setup for Alexander. And there are days when I know I don't have, there's the theory of the spoons for neurodivergence. I don't have any more spoons left. Spoons represent the energy, the bandwidth, the ability to do something. And I know sometimes I just don't have any more spoons. And I allow myself to let my home helper take over, or I let the learning support assistant take over, or I ask a question to someone else. I think that's super important. And when it's really bad, in the Caribbean, we're kind of stoic to a certain extent. The only way is up. When you're at the bottom of the barrel, you can only go up from there. So sometimes I wait and I let myself land. And I said, this is it. And by being at that point where I've given everything and nothing seems to work, I allow myself to breathe because there's nothing else I can do. And then I allow myself to go inside, and for other parents who have faith, that's something you need to have behind you. Know that you cannot do this alone. It's also one of the most scariest things ever, that who takes care of our kids when we're not here anymore, right? And I come from a very, very small family. But again, we have to have faith that this is not a solo journey at all.
True. And that brings me to my next question of parental burnout. Yeah, because you're juggling a lot of things. And although you do need a lot of physical energy into this, a lot more of emotional and cognitive energy, which goes into taking decisions for yourself, for your family, for children, and a lot of things around them. So tell us a little more about your phases of burnouts and how you've handled them in maybe different parts of this journey.
Somebody once said to me very beautifully that parents of children with special needs, and whether they're physically disabled or neurodivergent, we call these the invisible, needs for support. We live in our nervous system because we are tethered to our children. We feel. And if you're a parent like me that sleeps with your child, to feel and make sure they have a good night's sleep, because maybe you're worried about seizures or, sleep disruption. It's super, super, super important to know burnout is a real thing. It's super, super important to know it's not PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We, as the parent community, call it chronic, right? A chronic traumatic stress disorder. And it's about managing and realizing there are going to be up days and down days. But as much as I would like to say, avoid burnout, taking care of ourselves, which is a paradox because you're thinking, I'm here to take care of my child. If I stop and I take care of myself, that's being selfish. And I had to learn the hard way that it's not being selfish to take a step back, to go and find help for my health. It's part of being better to serve. It's better to be of service. And I'm not shy to say I'm 47 and been going through the perimenopause journey. So where I thought in my brain I can do this and keep going, tuck, 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 my body says, mm-mm. And the body keeps score, as we were saying earlier. So if I don't take care of myself, and this is body, mind, and spirit, I cannot co-regulate with Ali. So I think when I look at it from that point of view, how can I take care of myself in a way to better take care of him and those around him and keep the system going, that reframe has helped so much.
Amazing, because I do get this as a question very often. One, saying parents who say, there's so much guilt when I'm trying to relax. So they're like, we did try what you said. Like, I took a day off and I just tried to be by myself, read a book, go to the beach. But there's a constant guilt that I'm not taking care of my child while I'm doing this for myself. And like you said, for some of them, it might need a lot more redirection into guiding themselves and letting them know that there's nothing to be guilty about, because you're kind of re-energizing, or rather recharging yourself to give that energy back to your child. And a lot of times where we do tell them how the energies reflect. Like we were speaking earlier, that if you are exhausted, anxious, dysregulated, you're going to see the same at home, same with the child, and so on. And how that energy shifts are going to change the moment you are calmer, much more peaceful, much more regulated, is just truly tremendous.
Yeah, that's so very true, because especially at the beginning, our children, they're not born with the ability to self-regulate, even neurotypical children. They have to learn how to do this. And to a certain extent, when other people in the circle of care see you taking care of yourself, they also know you're sharper. And when you're by yourself, or you're in the gym, or you're on that beach, or you're having that cup of coffee or tea by yourself, and you feel the guilt coming on, my recommendation is, okay, this is coming in. Have a little book where you write something you'd like to do for him later. Put it into, this is something we did in creativity when I worked in corporate. Have that little book for things that you can do later on. But then you write it and you leave it. And also build that into your routine, because it's also, we have to be wary of quantity versus quality. Many parents are working, so they may not have the privilege or luxury of spending all their time with their child. And so it's important to realize that when you are with your child, you want to be with your child. 5 minutes of quality connect. It's better than 5 hours of I'm just there and I'm just doing this because we have to get this done. And this is something, if a parent can build this.
True.
Have quality time with your little one, or your person that you're taking care of, but also have time for yourself. But separately, what do I plan to do, or what do I look forward to doing? What do I get to do? And that's hopefully a helpful reframe of guilt.
True. That's so beautifully put forth. Like you mentioned in the conversation, a lot of parents are working and in different parts of their journey professionally, let's say. And this journey of being a neurodivergent family is a completely new experience. For a lot of families going through this the very first time, learning it the hard way, with a lot of information from different people, different sources, confused, helpless sometimes. And in the midst of all this, trying to also balance work and personal life and navigating this. So what is that you would suggest for such parents in terms of how you kind of reprioritize or prioritize things, helping them allocate space for themselves?
Again, it depends on how they like to learn, because it is important to do the research. It is important that when a doctor says 1, 2, 3, I mean, one doctor said to me at one point, we need to do a spinal tap because we think it's meningitis. And I'm like, are you sure? You haven't even done a chest x-ray. We have to educate ourselves, and you have to have your triangle. You have to have your pyramid. And for sure, our child, our loved one is at the top of it. But then, basically at the base, because They take up most of the time. So I think it's about learning efficiently, finding people you trust, finding sources that you trust, not just to take it on wholesale, but to offer back something and see their reaction. This is one of, I think, the best parts of having a professional like yourself, because I would come and I would say 1, 2, 3. You would reply to that. I'd take it away and think about it and then share it with the others and then come back and say, okay, this is what I would decide based on this. And it has to be a back and forth, because in the beginning, when I first met my doctors or the service providers, I thought this is, they know. But as I go along the journey, I realize, who's the expert? Who has all the data? It's me as a parent. And I also believe the sooner that we learn to trust our gut feeling, the faster it is that we stop trying this, trying that, trying the other. And it's about trying to make the whole process as efficient as possible and finding ways of doing it as smartly as possible. With the technology today, for example, about 24 months ago, people would say, ChatGPT, don't do that, don't listen to it. Now we've learned it's about the prompt. You find something, you put it in, and you have a discussion with, and the best part about chat, what are the questions I should be asking my professional or my service provider? And it's a type of technology that helps you to generate ideas. Yes. So again, when you talk to the mums on the groups, the way they're using it, they even share prompts. And the prompts are incredible. But it helps you to get over this, what should I do? And okay, let's try this. Let's monitor it for a while and then come back again. But also, don't just take one source. Ask others. Build that community where you find your resources.
True. And how, with so much of information going on, sometimes can just keep you confused or lost as well. Amidst the AI and the technology that's going, it's interesting. But the angle of what you said is getting as much information as you can and trying to restructure your thoughts, making sure you're not missing out on things that could potentially give you answers to, is a very interesting one.
No, I think being curious it's one of my biggest values.
Yes.
But it has also been one of the gold stars of our journey. Being curious. Somebody tells you something that you're like, you stop and you turn it over in your head and you look into that. And what does that mean? Ask questions. I think the more we ask questions, the more we learn. But when you ask a question, listen to the answer, turn that answer over in your head, and go from there. Be curious about the answer that you get. So I think it was Stephen Covey said, listen to understand.
Yes. So important in every aspect of life, I would say, right?
Yeah, not just corporate. A lot of my corporate skills, because I qualified as a coach a long time ago, but this is also something that I use. I use today with life.
Amazing. And you coming from a large part of your life being in the corporate world, hospitality and the services that you've provided, and today where you have put that in the back seat and put yourself forward for Ali and being the connector and the strong pillar for him. Although I do see often neurodiverse families, even. So tell us a little more about that.
So when I first started, I was like, who tells the parents who are working? Who tells those who don't have the time to go to this conference or that conference or read WhatsApps of conversations and whatnot? So in the beginning, I wanted to create a neurodiverse families space, events, clubs. I was also learning about the neurodiverse movement, the neurodivergent and neurodiversity movement, and the whole language that is there. So I think based on what I had seen at the time, what parents needed as well, I thought we needed a space. But here's the thing. With our journey, there are times when we can have bandwidth for so many things, and then it kind of is like an elastic. It comes down. And recently, for myself, I've had to, if I continued that there, I'd end up in burnout and crash. So I had to bring it back in. So, and it's not that it's gone. It just means that it's in a different space for now. And when the time is right, I can bring it back to the center. So I think very important, find your space, find your tribe, find your people, no matter where it is. And it might be in places you don't expect as well.
True. And that's so amazingly put, where it doesn't mean it's the end of a career or end of a world. You always find the right time and space to go back to it and find the purpose to what you're doing. Wonderful. What would you say is, not one thing, I'm sure Ali's taught you a lot, some of the things that you may have not learned if not for Ali?
I come from a culture where we're very programmed. You go to school, you go to university, you come out, you get a career. If you asked my mother in those days, preferably as a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And we're very programmed into believing in a system. When I started learning about the neurodiversity movement, and they're saying each neurodivergent is so individual, you have to look at the individual themselves, because there's a saying about autism: you meet one autistic individual. With Alexander, and it's so interesting because we taught this in the hospitality industry, every guest experience has to be bespoke based on the guest. And it means putting the guest at the center of, and it was only the guest who would be able to break the standards that we had drilled into our colleagues. So, stopping and letting Ali lead. I would never, ever, if you told me, have been able to do that. I always would read all the journals, everything, all the papers, all the PubMed articles, etc. Get depressed because in 5p-Minus is such a small studied space. But then when I started looking at what he likes, what is it that he's interested in? How can we, help him do something by framing it in a way that he understands, right? Because it is tough. The toughest person, this whole journey, it's as tough on the child as it is on the parent, especially if they're going through therapy and treatments and all these kinds of things. And when they are for the first time learning in what other neurotypicals are and how they're different, always being on the lookout, So, and it's kind of fun because you find little nuances and little new things. And when you look back, it's like we started with a little YouTube song, a nursery rhyme about planets. And then we ended up going to different parts of the solar system and knowing about the telescopes and encyclopedias about space and rockets and stuff like that. And recently, for example, he has had an extremely keen interest in Mario Kart. And I'm like, okay, so let's encourage it in a way that helps him to learn. So even if it's numbers or telling a story or reading, a lot of his books right now at level 2 or 3, whatever is his phonics level, it's themed in Mario Kart, right? And that's the kind of thing that has helped me figure out and explore and expand things that he likes to do. So that is what my biggest learning curve is: follow the child. Because usually we say, oh, they can't think for themselves, they can't, it's our responsibility. But if you really carefully look, then you know how to make your decisions based on what they like. I firmly believe we get our strengths, skills-wise, comes from the things we like doing the most. Yeah. So, yeah.
Curiosity is the key, and allowing your child to be curious, making their choices is so very important. And a lot of times we always say that, understanding their strengths is equally or sometimes more important than the challenges, because you can always drive the motive towards that and help them keep going and learning every single time, which is wonderful. My next question is regarding Ali's school experiences, right? So Ali now goes to a regular school and has a wonderful peer group around him, doing great in terms of how he's transitioned and adapting to the environment and the support that he gets. For a lot of parents, there's always a concern and a kind of, I would say, a fear that, will my child be accepted? What if my child gets bullied? What if my child doesn't thrive in that environment? So what has that journey been for you?
A huge experiment. A lot of people tell me, well, that was an expensive experiment. When we entered into mainstream, it was to see, does it fit? Knowing that it might work or it mightn't work. Knowing that the child that I have, what are my expectations? Academically, he may or may not. And I think because I treated it like an experiment, I have learned that when you have to let go of certain things, academics-wise, etc., it's not the same for him. And for us, I don't know for other parents, the secret has been finding a place, a space, a team that allows him to regulate. And the facility we chose, it is because there are spaces like that I haven't seen in other schools. The people who we work with at this school, the inclusion department, and this is so important, true inclusion is, how does your child feel accepted? More than anything else. And if your child needs to stand up and move around, and that's not something that the school will allow, then it's not the space for him. But that said, you also don't want to disrupt the whole ecosystem. So for us, being able to have the other spaces for us to go regulate and come back. And I'm super surprised because he enjoys when he is in the class, when he is in a space and you think he's not listening. He's allowed to sit on a beanbag and you think he's reading a book. When he's asked a question in Arabic, a foreign language, he answers. So I think finding a place that allows them to be themselves is so important. And because each child is different, what might work for my child may not work for your child. And even when you get there, still being in that sense of curiosity, how are we going to be? How are we going to do today? And in the 4 years that we've been in a school, only one day I've ever had to go in because he was anxious. But I also let him know, you self-advocate, we respect your self-advocacy, and we will follow that. So and I'm not sure if we're still going to be there in next year or the year after, but we keep going on with the experiment for as long as it goes. And tempering the results and the reports that come in with, what do you really want? So this is a beautiful thing about having IEPs and working with a team. You make it what you want it to be, right? What works for him. Within the framework, yes. But also, if you don't get exactly what you want, how can you work it that you get it as close to what you want as possible?
True. And you mentioned a lot of green flags rather for a child to understand, because that's a very common question parents asked. How do we know if our child is thriving in this environment? Do you think we should keep looking for more, or do you think this is not the best? And I always tell them, a happy brain learns. If your child is happy going into school, that means he's thriving in that environment. And that's, I think, the biggest green flag a parent should look for. On the other hand, your child's not wanting to go to school, that means it's not just about the environment, but it's possibly how the child processes that environment. Maybe they feel anxious, threatened, or they feel not belonged, which may give you a flag that, okay, maybe the child's not thriving in that environment. Yeah.
Yeah, and that point you look to change. I'm also, you mentioned something very, very important that is on my radar, and that's bullying.
Yeah.
And we have seen some things in the park or in certain spaces, and it's easy for me to say, okay, we don't go to the park anymore. So what I then do is I try to help with social engineering, and I'd have a conversation with the nanny, and I say, I teach her how to model. I say, and if any parent, if anybody, if any individual questions you refer back to me, because we've discussed this. And checking in with her to make sure, how did he feel, how did it happen? Because if I ask Ali, he's not able to recount and tell me back the incident or the experience. And it's interesting because we've turned some bullies into friends at the park, for example. And I have to trust to a certain extent this school, but we also know now in the United Arab Emirates we have a stronger anti-bullying policies, and we've seen in the papers the reinforcements of it happening. But also, I assume competence, and I teach Ali to stand up for himself, and I give him the vocabulary and the language, and he has used it once or twice. No, I don't like that. Stop it. So I think, again, it's rather than fearing, leaning into it. What can we do? Experimenting, trying different things and seeing. And that's what has worked for us. And I'm hoping that we continue doing that. And by the end of a school career, we'll be like, okay, that worked. But that's the only way I know how to work. Experiment, try, tweak. Okay, that didn't work. What can we do differently?
Amazing. And in this experience and journey that you've had, is there anything that you would have done differently if you had a chance to go back?
I would have left work earlier. I would have retired earlier. But I also believe in all things happen for a reason, and the way they happen for a reason. Everything I've done, I've not just tried to do with as much knowledge as possible, but I've always tried to have a certain amount of grace. And that means intention. It means doing it to the best of my ability. And that's something we as parents also have to understand. I once read something that human beings, we make the best decisions at that point in time. Our brain cannot do anything else with all the information that you have. If you're a smoker, your body thinks smoking is good for you until you reframe that and change that. So any decision I have made in the past, it was the best I could have at that point in time. So to be very honest, I don't think there's very much that I would do differently, apart from leave the corporate structure to give myself space to come into Ali's world and kind of create what we've created so far. And I think that's super important, because when you have that space, as much as you can for yourself, you create that space as much for your child as well.
True. Tell us a little more about providing alternative spaces for children, especially in the neurodivergent world, which would allow them to thrive better.
Again, going back to the child, what works for them? What do they like? And I don't think it just needs to be things like alternative therapy, like music therapy or art therapy. Those are things that are provided. But what are things that Ali liked? I had to think that would create a blended learning space for him. So remember earlier I spoke about the nursery rhyme on YouTube turning into space encyclopedias, turning into... I took it even as far as taking him to the Space and Astronomy Academy in Sharjah, where there's a beautiful exhibition and the planetarium is just amazing. Themes. When he's learning about things at school, he loves to come home and watch television. So I found a YouTube video about it. When we can't travel extensively as other families may do, but what can I do in 2 or 3 days that really crafts or creates a moment for him that others may not think about? So since he loved Mario Kart, guess what? In Abu Dhabi, there is the Yas circuit, Marina circuit, where they have Formula One closing. So we do a bit of a kind of a social story before, and then if you can get to go in and have a look at, arrange a tour or something like this, because there are so many things like that. So it doesn't just necessarily mean in a therapeutic setting for me or for us as a family. It also means in social engineering. So like when we did our last clinic visit, I said, you know what we haven't done for a long time? A picnic. And guess what? When we threw down the blanket next to the clinic, there is these drone deliveries. Oh, that was like going to the cinema for him, sitting and looking at the drone deliveries happening in that part of the city. And it's like, that was the best day of the week for him that day. Just doing simple things and not being afraid to try things. Because I have tried art and stuff, and he's like, oh, yucky, not for him. But I'll try it again later in the future. Who knows?
True. And coming back to what you said, especially in a fast-paced world like this, where parents want to wish the best for their child, but also understanding that sometimes it turns out to be a burnout for the child because you're just overloading. There's school, and then there's therapies, and then there's extracurriculars, and then there's so much going on. And although we do, even as clinicians, say, let's just try our best to push them to their best potential, sometimes I think we miss out on the fact that the push is a bit too much, burning out the child as well. So have you faced a similar experience for Ali?
Absolutely, because I'm like his executive assistant, putting all the appointments in and whatnot. And I've had to force myself recently to do a do nothing space where I am terrified. We plan nothing that time. We plan not to go out. And if he has something on the day, there's nothing else allowed on the day as well. So, for example, and I still am learning, I'm burned, because we came to the clinic that day, we had the picnic, and then I went to take him to the astronomy, and then he was kaput. After that, he couldn't even walk up the stairs, and I thought, oh, no, that's too much. Yesterday, we had a sports coaching session at home. I made sure there was nothing in front of that for the whole day. And as tempted as I am to rush around and take him to the mall to do Christmas shopping or stuff like this, what serves him right now? I know tomorrow we're going to go. There's a beautiful POD event where we go to Queen Elizabeth II, where there is a theatre production, and they allow us to come and see their dress rehearsal. He's so excited about that. I swear last night he didn't sleep because of that. Pacing things and being mindful, and it's all in Google. It's all in Google, so you can see it visually. Okay, so if I have too many of that color, that's not going to work, and it's really hard. It's not easy, because now we're talking about, do we increase this? Do we do that? But then I have to realize, then we have to cut something else in exchange for, or we can do this next term instead, or we can do this next quarter. So that has helped as well.
Amazing. So balance and mindfulness.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What is that you wish schools and communities had been more informed about neurodiversity and inclusion?
When you give neurodivergent children a space to be themselves, that's how Elon Musk emerges. That's how Bill Gates emerges. That's how Steve Jobs emerges. They have to have space. And inclusion doesn't mean they fit into the system or they're out. You know, it can be a simple thing as just have a space allowing them to go and release and come back. Also, involve the parents. The biggest stakeholder I'm saying this to parents as well. You are part of it. You don't just hand your child over and leave them. The best school is the one that listens to me and helps to incorporate certain things. And as long as we can find a space like that, it works for us as a family. For communities as well. And we're very blessed to be in a space like Dubai where we have legal and entrenched, you know, you have the person of determination cards, you have the sunflower lanyards. Yes. And even though some people say, oh, but it's just for marketing or whatnot, hold them accountable and say to them, that's not how it works, because we're all learning. For me as a parent, he's only 7, I'm learning. And if there are other parents out there who say, no, this is not right. For me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. If you go in there, guns are blazing, first, innings, it doesn't work like that. Say something, let them listen. And if that doesn't work, find a way to escalate it or find another way around it. And I think that's super important because we're all here to learn. I had never heard about autism, ADHD, neurodivergence, neurodivergent needs, supports 10 years ago. 5 years ago was when I started really learning about this. So we're all here to learn.
True. And like you rightly said, learning from real voices which echo in this ecosystem of neurodivergent and inclusive spaces, which brings to one of the most commonly asked questions, which, you know, especially families who are new into the neurodivergent experiences ask me is, where do I find my tribe?
The first person that really helped me to reframe my thoughts, I found on Instagram here locally. And I'm not shy to say I stalked her a bit. I put that little bell on all posts to see what it is she talks about. And that's how I do it. The same way you do for influencers that you like, you do the same. And if you like how they think, you reach out, you reach base, and then they'll put you in contact with their networks.
Which is great. So some stalking work to be done. Fantastic. So my last question to you would be something which I want you to imagine. And if you were to tell me how you would want Ali's future, not in terms of his achievements, but the experiences you want Ali to gather in for his future.
I know that Ali is happy when he's laughing, giggling, having fun. He is a cheeky monkey. I want that in the future he's able to be himself. He has such a character that he draws people in. And I want him to have the ability and the space and the environment, the ecosystem to be able to do that in the future. And I know that's going to be difficult because even as us growing up as adults, we were told you have to be a certain way to fit in. I want him to be how he is, and even if he doesn't fit in, to feel that he can make the space for himself to be accepted. He's doing that right now, miraculously. The kind of people that he attracts, the kind of friends he makes, the kind of impact he has. That's my wish, that he can continue doing that for the rest of his life.
Amazing. And so beautifully said. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for being on our episode today. It was really amazing to hear. Although we chat a lot, I've learned a lot from you. I have a lot more questions for you. Hopefully in the next coming episodes, we'll speak more about it. But thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.